Welcome to Hope at Night, featuring Alisha Mecene, Vinny MacIssac, Q&A with our live audience, and host Anil Kanda. Today's episode, can mental health be restored? And here's your host, Anil Kanda.
Welcome to Hope at Night. How are you feeling today? It's that time of the year when we typically think about what we are thankful for. But do you know that you can also have a profound impact on your mental health? Studies have found that a single act of thoughtful gratitude produces an immediate 10% increase in happiness and a 35% reduction in depressive symptoms. But mental health can be a big struggle for many of us. When difficult times come, it's easy to get overwhelmed, anxious, stressed, and depressed. Right now, we're going to meet a young mother and a mental health counselor on her own journey through the valley of infertility, miscarriage, and then a miraculous twin pregnancy that was fraught with challenges for their survival and also for her. We're going to find out how she came out on the other side of all of that. Let's welcome to Hope at Night, Alisha Mecene.
Thank you. Hi there. Looking forward to our conversation today.
Yes. Now, you have been a mental health counselor for over 16 years. Is that right?
Yes. I've been a therapist for quite a long time. I'm the founder of the Emotional Wellness Boutique, which is an online platform for psychotherapy for teenage girls and women. And it is an online opportunity for clients to be seen in Bermuda, which is where I reside, and internationally. I was U.S. trained, but I'm looking forward to continuing to provide the gift of healing strategies and support for women and teenage girls. And so it's been a thrilling ride of providing a holistic mind, body, spirit approach to mental health. And we've seen miraculous things happen in the context of sessions and therapy.
Well, I'm going to be really excited about this conversation.
Yeah.
I want to start off by asking you this. I just heard about this from one of the producers. They said they learned about your recent pregnancy.
Yeah.
And you were on bed rest for 100 days afterwards. Can you explain that? What happened?
Over 100 days. So we were on a traumatic, turbulent journey to parenthood. We experienced infertility. We were told that we would not be able to get pregnant. We had a miraculous pregnancy which led to child loss.
Oh, man.
It was an unexpected, painful circumstance. And then we got pregnant again with twins. We had an unexpected twist, which led me to be on bed rest for over 100 days, each day not being sure if they would survive, and the doctors still being shocked that the pregnancy was ongoing. But God literally worked miracles within the life of our twin girls.
He definitely gave you a double portion.
Double portion for the loss, double portion for the journey.
Right. So let me understand this right.
Sure.
There was infertility challenges.
Yeah.
Did you say there was a miscarriage?
Yeah. So after over 5 years of infertility, we had the doctors say that pregnancy was impossible.
Wow.
Anatomically impossible. So we were coming to grips with the life without kids. And then this surprise thing happened. We got pregnant. How was it possible? Only God. We celebrated. We started to dream of a life with our child. And then our child didn't survive the pregnancy. Right. And we were coming to grips with how could God, my loving Father, take away the one thing that my husband and I had prayed over, had cried over, had been waiting for so long. And so our faith was met with what it means to lament. To cry out to God and say, I don't understand what you're doing here. I don't know if I can trust you, but still I trust you. Wow. And so it was a heartbreaking journey, but we moved through that journey of lamenting and mourning on the loss of our child. And even through that experience, we saw God.
Wow.
We saw God.
So you went to challenges of infertility, to a miscarriage, and then a surprise with twins.
Twins. No one was expecting that. When the sonogram was occurring, I said, I know that's a baby, I've been here before, but what's the second thing? What's that over there? And they said, oh, surprise, you're having twins.
What are your babies' names?
They're Zola and Imani.
Wow, those are beautiful names.
Imani's name means faith.
Okay.
And Zola's name means calm waters. And that's what God led us through. After the turbulence, we were moved into calm waters with welcoming our girls into the world.
So as a mental health counselor, you've counseled so many people.
Yes.
Over 16 years, plus you were part of various organizations that help young people.
Yes.
And then you went through this crisis with your family.
Yeah.
Now, how do you deal with that? I mean, you're so used to helping other people, but what do you do when it impacts you the way it did?
Yes. You let yourself feel the feelings. Sometimes we're quick to move into numbing, to shutting it off, to not allowing ourselves to experience the pain because it is so unimaginable. And so part of the process is trusting God to carry you through the feelings. I'm a therapist that believes in therapy, which means that I connected with the therapist to also support me through the journey, right? And so allowing...
So let me hear this right.
Yes.
You yourself got a therapist.
I sure did.
The therapist got a therapist.
The therapist,
okay.
And that's very common. Many of us do, right? The same way how medical doctors have medical doctors.
Right.
Dentists go to dentists.
Makes sense.
Right? We are all in need of healing. We are all in need of a safe space to land. And those that tend to be the best in providing support have to also be able to receive the thing that you're giving out constantly. It has to flow through you to flow back out of you.
Wow. So through this whole experience that you have gone through, obviously from being a mental health counselor for many years, and then you went through, again, the challenges of infertility, the miscarriage. Before you had your twins, what kind of faith journey did you go on during that time?
Ooh, turbulent, ups and downs. It's amazing. The Bible talks about how God is near the brokenhearted. And so during that season, I had never felt so close to God, yet I had never had so many angry protests towards God. And as Christians, I think sometimes you want to jump right to the happy Psalms without really looking at the scriptures that talk about lament, that cry out to God, that say, what is going on here? What are you doing? And so I allowed myself to go through that process.
Wow. And then you came out through the other end of that.
Came out through the other end and asked for God to show me who He was on the journey. I'll never forget a moment after the loss of our child. I had come back, my husband and I had a little private beachside funeral for her. And I came home and I looked over the water because we live in Bermuda, so it's beautiful water surrounding us. And I feel gutted. I feel numb, and I say, God, I don't know how I'm gonna get through this. I'm closing my eyes. I need you to speak to me right now because I don't have it in me to wake up tomorrow in another day where my child is not here with me. And I kid you not, I opened up my eyes, and as I looked across the water, this is a space where I tend to talk to God, I saw the words hope. Hope. Plastered across the scenery, plastered across the water. And we named our daughter Hope.
Oh, wow.
Because God was telling us that He was going to give us hope where there was no hope. And so while I utilized therapy and utilized the techniques that are supportive, I also clung to God. And later on, when our girls made it and we got on the other side and we were trying to heal after the traumatic journey that we were on, one day I sat with my babies and I was rocking them to sleep. And I said, God, how did they make it? Like, what were you doing during this journey that I couldn't see? They weren't supposed to make it. Our doctors told us after the procedure that we had to try to save them. She said, I've done what I can. There's literally nothing holding them in. They're going to come out prematurely. If I were you, I would just end this pregnancy because they're not going to make it. They're going to come out, this is 18 weeks.
So you were actually advised by medical professionals to
They were saying based on where they were in the pregnancy that premature birth was inevitable. And they were basically giving us a choice that says, hey, you can either go through with this pregnancy and they're likely just going to pass away, or if there's a miracle and they survive, they will likely have significant medical challenges. And so they gave us these options to consider. And I was like, God, what are we going to do? My husband was like, what are we going to do? And so as I'm sitting on the other end, holding my babies, smelling them, and just saying, God, how did this happen? God literally showed me him holding our babies in.
Wow.
Literally holding our babies in place, because there was nothing that was doing that anatomically. Right. And so now we can look and see God's presence, God's healing throughout the journey that we've been on.
Right. You were patient and waiting for the goodness of God in your life. Right?
And it's not easy.
Right.
Sometimes we can think that being in a state of waiting, that be still and know that I am God, doesn't mean that you're restless.
Right.
You can be restless, you can be agitated, but sometimes we try to over-sanitize our experience. Right. But we want to bring to God our real experience. God, I'm trying to wait on you, but it's hard. Give me the patience that I need. Give me a sense of stillness that I need to be in this moment right now.
Well, it definitely sounds like you've become an even deeper person through this whole experience.
Yeah.
You know, the one thing I've always learned is deep sorrow often preps the way for an even deeper joy. You know, and I'm sure looking upon your two children, how much you love them,
Yes.
and you're so thankful to God for that.
Yes.
For them. So
Yes.
let me ask you a question.
Sure.
What would you tell couples that are going through that whole journey in the wilderness? Maybe it's challenges of infertility. Maybe the doctor told them, hey, you guys cannot get pregnant.
Yes.
Maybe there was a miscarriage.
Yes.
What would you tell a couple like that? Or maybe it's a single mom, or whoever
it is.
What would you tell?
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
Yeah. I would say, first of all, to really connect with a mental health provider, that you don't have to go through this alone. This is a traumatic experience. And so the same way, if you're cooking and you burn your hand significantly on the stove, you're going to get medical treatment for that. We're not just going to simply pray it away. We're going to pray as we're going to the hospital for support. So sometimes people think that they have to do it on their own. When you access the support, you can figure out how experience is impacting you, and you can find strategies to support you along the way. You can obtain couples counseling, because often when you're walking through infertility, intimacy can be eroded because your intimate life has become a scientific project, and now doctors are included, and you're using timetables and thermometers, and it can take the spontaneity and just the joy out of how you would typically like to bring a child into the world. So accessing the support where you can, rather than trying to tough it out and to over-spiritualize it. Seek the support, be connected to those feelings in the present moment. Allow yourself to, especially for the woman, to find ways to provide deposits into your body. There's so many withdrawals that come out during this process. You're getting procedures, you're experiencing loss for some women inside of your body. And so there can be a disconnect and even shaming that, why can't my body do this? So whether it's stretching, whether it's exercising, whether it's massaging, whether it's progressive muscle relaxation, find ways to provide your body with the healing support that it needs as it takes you through this journey.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is self-care. Take care of yourself, right?
Self-care.
Yeah, you're giving, or you're a lot is being taken out of you, but you need to, like you were saying, deposit back into the body.
Yes, and look for safe spaces to land what you're experiencing. Part of how my private practice came to be is I felt God, once I was on the other side of my healing journey, start to tell me to share, to normalize, to speak out that thing which is often a secret, hidden, quiet, shameful experience that couples and women and persons in general are flowing through. And part of that, speaking out and saying, hey, this is what I went through. Wow. It opened the doors I started getting messages from people around the world saying, me too. Oh, I'm not the only one. I don't hear people talking about this. And so I thought it was just me. I thought I was the only one going through this. And so we are able to share our testimonies and our experiences in safe spaces and provide the opportunity and the invitation to invite others into an experience of healing.
Alisha, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
As someone who counsels lots of people, what would you say are the most significant struggles that people are having today?
Depression and anxiety tends to be the most commonly reported mental health concern. So anxiety about the future, anxiety about their past. And what it can look like is overperforming, overworking, not knowing how to be still, right? And so it can easily be masked in high performance and success. Right. But are you able to find peace? Depression is also another common one. So hopelessness, saddened mood, pulling back and not being able to connect with the people that you typically care about are some of the most commonly reported concerns. And most recently, we're hearing a lot of more awareness about trauma, especially post-COVID. It's always been with us. Every generation has experienced trauma, but now we're starting to name it.
Right.
Now we're starting to talk about it.
And what I'm hearing is that people may not even realize how much they've been impacted and what's affected them. Is that right?
Yes. We're often not given the space to be still and ask yourself, how am I truly feeling? Even in spiritual context, we might find the need to mask and say, I'm blessed and highly favored. Right. You know, praise the Lord, everything's all right. And we can flow out of being inauthentic.
Right.
And so therapy provides a space where we can say that, yep, you can do that, but then how are you really feeling? And then you start to slow it down and have conversations about what people are really feeling. Ooh, then the floodgates open and healing is unlocked.
Right. Wow, that's fantastic. Let me ask you another question.
Sure.
For the person who's listening or watching this and they're wondering, where do I find a good counselor? Where do I find a good therapist? How do you find someone who would fit you and root out maybe those who wouldn't be good matches for you? Where do you go? What do you do?
It's a really good question. So finding a good psychotherapist is kind of like dating, right? Sometimes you have a good match, sometimes you walk away like, what in the world was that? Would not be revisiting that experience. Right. So I just want to normalize that, because sometimes people may connect with a therapist and think that this one person is synonymous for all of their experiences. It's the same way you go to any health professional and you're looking for the right fit for you. So looking for someone within your state, if you're living in the US, is often a good place to begin. Asking a friend if they've also engaged in therapy, who have they utilized before. That could be a good place to begin. Google therapist in, and then put, your area that you live in.
A counselor on, let's say, Zoom or Skype, is the experience diminished?
So that was a thought that even I had as a psychotherapist going into COVID. Prior to COVID, I was primarily in-person therapist. And when COVID came, so many of us had to adapt. Right. I have not found it to be a tremendous disadvantage to do online therapy. Okay. There are certain scenarios where you may not engage in online therapy if there's significant concerns about self-harming or significant suicidal thoughts. Those might be best placed in person, but by and large, I don't find clients to find it a barrier. Some of my clients, they come with their pajamas on, they have their dinner in front of them. It's casual, it's comfortable, and it's accessible to wherever you are.
Right. There's probably more advantages than there are disadvantages, right?
Exactly.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. We're going to continue our discussion. But right now, it's time to go to a break. But coming up next, we'll meet someone who is passionate about the intersection of mental health and faith. He's got some great insights to share. So don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Hope at Night. In our earlier segment, we met Alisha Mecene and learned about how she was able to navigate difficult personal events as a woman, as a mental health counselor, and as a person of faith. In this segment, we will meet someone who struggled as a young teen with the breakup of his family when his parents divorced. But it was his journey to social work and to God that helped patch his life together and brought him to where he is today. Please welcome to Hope at Night, Vinny MacIssac. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Thanks for having me. Yeah, absolutely. Now, Vinny, today
Yes.
you are a pastor.
I am a pastor.
Right. But before that, you did social work for a number of years. How many years did you do social work?
About 10 years I worked in mental health on and off. I did community development, but mostly worked with psychiatric population in terms of helping them reintegrate back into a residential setting after their life had been greatly disrupted through a psychiatric event. And I did that for about 10 years. It was full of challenges, full of depth, and you really get to see, and I think when we talk about breaking down the stigma of mental health, you really get to see how normal people are. You know, like we have this idea that people who have had depression or bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or any of these sort of really popular psychiatric diagnoses we might hear about on TV or have a family member, these are just people you know every day. And something has gone wrong and they just need a pause. They just need a place. They need a sense of safety.
Now, let me ask you a question. You spent many years in social work and then you went to church work. Did you see a difference in people?
My church may be watching. No. No, people are people, right?
Right.
And I think that's a really important thing that we understand. I'm really interested in taking away the stigma of, you know, I'm not even sure how I feel about the word mental illness. I'd rather focus on mental health because we got to take away that stigma because people are just going through stuff. And as a pastor, when I think about this on a theological level, I think about why wouldn't you be depressed in this world? Why wouldn't you realize that you're going to have disruptions in what is normal or brings joy to you in this world? I mean, I believe we were designed to be in a better place. I believe that the world is fundamentally a little bit sideways. It's lost track along the way.
In other words, if this world isn't affecting you, maybe something's wrong.
Exactly. Those are the ones I really worry about.
Wow.
Right? So let's take that stigma down because I believe that we all have an obligation to build our emotional health. We all have the obligation to build our spiritual health. We have this obligation to understand that this was not how everything was intended to be. You know, before coming here today, I looked at the news. That's a big mistake, right? I mean, there are reasons why, you know, we just went through a global pandemic. Right. I don't think we've even began to see the real impact that's going to come out of that. The isolation, you know. People are attached but detached in this world, you know, like I can see you through Zoom, but do I know you as a person?
Right. A lot of the protocols that were coming from the public health department had to do with your biological safety, but not your mental health.
Right. If 9/11 affected a whole generation of the millennials, like, and we talk about the impact of that one isolated event, predominantly in New York City. What about the impact of an event that happened worldwide to everyone my son's age? He's 10.
Right.
You know, all at the same time, all had the same experience. How might that have changed our global psyche, right?
Vinny, let me ask you a question, though. Have you encountered mental health challenges as a pastor? Not when you were in social work or even before then, but as a pastor, as a minister, as a spiritual leader. Do spiritual leaders struggle with mental health issues?
Oh man, we're under a lot of pressure. If you have to perform a sermon every week, you have to have people's answers. And hey, you also are bedside with people.
Right.
When they're dying, you know, you're journeying through other people's trauma with them. I mean, if you're a good pastor, hopefully that's what you're doing. But we also have our own trauma, right? So, yeah, I not only have seen a therapist, I have seen many therapists, and I keep a therapist even if I'm not in any crisis. I want someone to know my psychological baseline so that if I am in trouble, they will be able to identify how much trouble I'm in. And so I went through a number of crises in my life, in my ministry. There was a point in my life where my wife was near death. She had several strokes, several cerebral bypasses, and it was hard. And what I went through, though, is not unusual to what anybody else is going through. Again, from a spiritual point of view, the world is off track.
Right.
We were designed to be in a place that perpetuated joy.
Right.
And so we need to get back to building things into our life that create joy, create happiness, create enjoyment. You know, we're such a serious species.
Let me ask you a question then, based on that. What does the Bible say about mental health or emotional health? Does the Bible even talk about that?
Yeah, it talks about it a lot. I mean, we can just go through the Bible characters, right? We can talk about Moses. Jeremiah wrote a book called Lamentations. You know, we can talk about Daniel. You know, had a vision that was so overwhelming he passed out. We can talk about David, who wrote some pretty deep stuff in the Psalms. But the Bible says Jesus wept 3 times. Once over a city, once over the death of a friend, and once over the fate of the cross before him. One of my favorite Bible passages in Hebrews 12 says that for the joy set before him, he endured the shame of the cross. I like to think about just the very fact that Jesus, joy, and shame are in the same Bible verse.
Oh, wow.
Right? So even Jesus faced struggles. Right. He had to endure. He had to go through a shameful process like crucifixion. He was, you know, his disciples ran away from him at times. His friends betrayed him. You know, he felt that emotional impact. So, hey, I think it's okay if a pastor does too.
Right. I was actually looking at a statistic, and feel free to chime in, Alisha, as well on this, that young adults seem to be the population group most susceptible to mental health challenges currently. I'm sure every group is impacted, but it seems that young adults, there seems to be an increasing, alarming rate of them who are struggling with mental health issues, or at least they're being more identified now, right? What advice could you give to young adults? What tools would you recommend to young adults today, 18 to 35, about how to navigate through mental health challenges, maybe depression, anxiety, fears, suicidal thoughts? What would you say?
I think one of the most important things is to be honest with what you're actually experiencing. I think one thing that I hear oftentimes with teen clients that I support and young adults is the need to present a social media persona that does not match their actual lived experience. And so when you strip the happy post and the happy images that are sent out there, when you strip that all away, a lot of them are quietly in their bedrooms feeling lonely, feeling disconnected, feeling like they don't know what their purpose is. And so I think it's helpful to find balance in our exposures to these platforms so that we can have time for sacred pause. We can have time for meditation. We can have time for quiet spaces again to truly connect with what we're feeling. And including a holistic approach to mental health that looks at, are you exercising? Are you moving? Are you drinking enough water? What's your sleep cycle like? What's your bedtime routine looking like? Are you in screen time the hour before bedtime? Because even that can have an impact on your quality of rest and your quality the next day, right? So a holistic approach to mental health looks at all the aspects of your being, and it creates a routine, it creates a daily process that improves the way in which you live your everyday life.
Wow, beautiful.
I love that because I think we talk about social media and screen presence. Sometimes you can feel like you know someone on the other side of a screen, particularly with video apps, right? You follow them, like they're, you know, you follow them, you're part of their, you know, every day there's a new video. You watch that new video every day, but that is not a real relationship, right? It feels like it's a real relationship. And I think this is part of what has happened even in the pandemic is we have screen relationships, but you know, in the virtual space, there's a phrase, go out and touch grass, and it means like sometimes you got to leave the screen and engage in actual real relationships.
Right.
And I wonder if we're this world that feels connected, but doesn't have actual relationships. Are we looking at a lonely generation
Right.
that builds connections through screens, but not through touch?
Right.
Not through presence.
Yeah, globalization has increased exponentially the last number of years, but we feel further away from each other than ever before, more divided than ever before.
More connected and more divided, right? Like there's a dichotomy there, right?
What an unusual paradox that we're in here.
There's a lot of fear at the base of it. So when I connect with clients that are, in some cases, experiencing addiction, if we're going to be frank with what it can look like, right? An excessive use, inability to discontinue. What we don't want to do is meet it with shaming. Why can't you put this thing down, right? What we want to do is say, what is this providing you? How is this serving you? And how can we find what it's providing you with to be provided in other ways of your life? So if you're looking for connections, those friends that you start reaching out to. If you're looking for a sense of self-importance, let's talk about those hobbies that you used to do that used to make you feel powerful, that used to make you feel invigorated, right? How can we stream the same things that you get from those tools in other areas of your lives?
Wow, that's fantastic. Let me ask you a question. Are there tools in the Bible that address mental health challenges?
Yeah, there are a ton. I know you mentioned earlier about the examples in the Bible. My goodness, where there are humans, the Bible is a story of humans and their connection with God. Where there are humans, there is mental health concerns, right? And the Bible talks about what responses were there. So whether you're talking about Elijah, let's talk about what it means to be called by God and suicidal simultaneously.
At the same time, right?
Simultaneously called, right? But activating trauma responses because you are running for someone that wants to do you harm, right? And what happened in the Bible, what we hear is that God sat him down, that there, as you read the text, there was a sitting down to sleep, to rest, and to find nourishment. Right? As you read the rest of that scripture. Some of us are churning so much that our body literally needs rest. We're neglecting our holistic health. And so it's important to look at these stories in the Bible. Naomi, she was experiencing grief.
Great story, yeah.
Right? She experienced being taken from her culture, put in a foreign place, the loss of her husband, the loss of her sons. And the antidote, relationship. This daughter-in-law that connected with her, Boaz, who provided her with support. And she said yes. So some of us, God is sending to us support, sending to us resource, but our pride has us in a place of standing still rather than saying yes.
Right.
I'm going to accept those invitations.
I like that idea of relationships because even Jesus, right? He had his close friends. And I'm not even talking about his disciples.
Yeah.
You know, like he had Mary and Martha and Lazarus outside of Bethany, outside of Jerusalem. This just a place that he could go to and be himself and sit down in a chair and have a meal and I'm sure laugh.
Right. You know, that's remarkable you bring that up. It does seem that Jesus had an outer circle of people who he worked with, evangelized, and then he had you could say an inner circle of his disciples, but then he also seemed to have a very center circle of people who not just he gave and poured into, but also poured into him.
Bingo.
You know?
And I think that's key. It's one thing to have a one-way relationship with someone where you're the giver, you're the care provider. It's another thing, another level perhaps, into the relationship to be vulnerable. And I think that's a key thing we're lacking in our society, is the practice of being vulnerable, the practice of being transparent, and being okay with people seeing you, warts and all.
Right.
And that's what I see. I think that's why Jesus weeps at the death of Lazarus, because he's weeping at the death of his buddy, you know?
Right. Right, and we also learned about the power of gratitude early on, right? And it's also in Scripture, right? The
Yes,
power of
it
gratitude.
is.
What does the Bible teach about gratitude?
Yeah, gratitude is everything, right? Like that's what to praise God means, is to give back thanks for just the blessing of life, just the blessing of breath in your lungs, right? I think we overthink the world sometimes. We make it more complicated. This is what anxiety does to us, right? But just like I was thinking the other day when I was on vacation, I was driving back through the mountains, I was thinking just how incredible it is that we're just all here. You know, just stop and take a moment and realize, regardless of your worldview, this is an incredible experience called life we're all having together. That's an amazing thing.
Beautiful.
I love that you brought up gratitude. In fact, there's research that talks about how psychotherapy, when it includes one's spirituality, it tends to have better outcomes. Here's the kicker. The outcomes tend to be improved depending on your perception of God.
Wow.
So what does your God look like?
So what I'm hearing from you, Alisha, and I'm sorry for interrupting, but it's really fascinating. You're saying generally a lot of psychotherapy doesn't always bring in the dimension of spirituality. And you're saying, wait a minute, we are whole beings, we have a spiritual side, and when you start bringing that also in to the therapy or the counseling or the progress, you know, that there is a remarkable improvement and growth and thriving. And it has to do also with our perspective of who God is.
Yes, and certainly psychotherapy, it depends on the practitioner often, right? But there's a lot of research that supports the utilization and the integration of spirituality and psychotherapy. And there are many of us psychotherapists that do utilize it to work in harmony. And I thought of that when you mentioned gratitude, because there's tons of research that talks about how gratitude can reduce stress, reduce anxiety, reduce depression, increase happiness. And then when I read my word in Psalms 92, verse 1 and 2, it says, "It is good to praise or give thanks to the Lord and make noise to your name, O Most High, to proclaim in your love in the morning and your faithfulness at night." You know what this points to? Routine. I'm caring for my mental health when I wake up in the morning. I'm playing affirmations, I'm playing biblical affirmations, I'm playing Psalms, I'm praying. That is the words that I'm flowing into my life as I start the day. When I end my day, I'm similarly doing the same, because throughout the day there is drainage.
Right.
There are stressors, there are triggers. And so in order to have a balanced mental health, which I must add, having the presence of a mental health concern does not mean that you cannot have a healthy mental health. It is, how do I manage it, right? It's not the absence of concerns, it's knowing how to manage it. And here's one way in which we can manage it.
Right.
By gratitude, by giving thanks.
The consistency of it.
The consistency.
Let me ask you a question then. Say you look back on your day and you have nothing to be thankful for. Maybe it was the worst day of your life. Is that even still a time to give God thanks?
So you can start with lamentations. God, this day, what is going on? I had a hard time coping. I almost didn't make it through. So what we're not talking about is toxic positivity.
Right.
Right.
We're talking about a balanced approach that acknowledges the reality, right, of what is. And what I learned through my own experience of lamenting is I started with my frank, raw experience. And I said, yet God, I still, in the midst of this experience, I give you thanks. I don't feel like it in this moment. There is no emotion, there's no drums, there's no music to accompany me where I am feeling this thing, but I'm purposing in my heart to still honor you, that you are God, even when the world around me feels like it is unpredictable and out to get me.
Wouldn't you say, Alisha, that being able to admit to yourself and being able to admit to God that you're not okay is one of the most okay things there is?
Yes.
You know, because if you can't admit to yourself and to God where you're at, how are you going to tell a therapist or anybody else?
And then it makes us hard to form intimate relationships with the people around us. If we can't first begin to be honest and real with ourselves, then it's harder to then flow with you in a way where I can be fully present in who I am, because I'm not even sure how I'm really feeling in this moment.
Right.
And so even this thing impacts the relationships.
Reflection.
Reflection. right? Biblical journaling, it might look like. You may be, as your mental health plan, utilizing prayer journaling, which might sound like the combination of those lamentations, lamenting, and coming back to Psalms, but you're offloading, you're off-pouring.
What I'm hearing is, do not be afraid to unload everything to God. Is God so compassionate that he's willing to hear our junk, our struggles, our sins, our mess-ups, our wrong desires? Does God really want to hear that stuff?
I think he does. I think he does, and I think he knows. He's God.
Yes.
He knows our need to express it.
Yeah.
I like the word you use, toxic positivity, and I think this is a problem in Christianity.
Yes.
Let's be honest. We all have scars.
Yes.
Right.
You know, and I think sometimes the reason we wear suits to church is to cover our scars. You know, but community is the other thing, right, Alisha, that we need to bring out is and so if everyone's hiding their scars, how are we having any honesty in our communities, in our assemblies, in our churches, in our gatherings? You know, if relationships are key, and we can't be honest to God about what's going on, I'll never be honest with you.
And understanding that God has broad shoulders. God can handle whatever I bring. I can be authentic. And you talked about compassion, right? Do you mind if I read a quick?
Go ahead.
Does God, so I think it comes to the part of, does God care about my mental health even? Right? And the Bible talks about that in 2 Corinthians 1, verse 3-4. Praise be God and the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. Here it is, the Father of compassion. And the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all of our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble, right? So the God of all comfort. When was the last time I thought of God as my space of comfort? Right? And sometimes for those of us that have experienced difficulty with parents and caregivers growing up, we may not have experienced a caring, gentle, nurturing relationship. And so that lens is placed on how we view God as this tyrant, as this person that just doesn't really care. He just wants me to perform. Right? He just wants me to remain sinless and do all the things. But God is the God of all comforts. He is the God of compassion who is there for all of our troubles.
Well, you know, as we're just wrapping this up, I'm really impressed by just this dialogue and this conversation. I think to myself right now as I'm listening, how many people need to hear this in our churches, in our government, in our hospitals. What you guys are describing is a dimension of healing that seems to be needed like never before. Wow. Well, thank you so much. We're going to have to take a break, but when we come back, we get to hear some questions from our live audience for our guests tonight. Don't go away. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome back to Hope at Night. We've met a counselor and a pastor who've shared some of their insights and their own honest struggles when it's come to their own mental health. But some of you may have questions for them. I'd like now to turn to our live in-studio audience to give them an opportunity to ask their questions. Why don't we do that right now? Let's go to our first question.
Hi, I was wondering, is it possible for us to become completely healed from past trials/trauma through Christ or through therapy?
It's okay to normalize using Christ and a therapist, and that healing looks different for different individuals. So there are some persons that they walk through a therapeutic process. They walk through seeking as Christ as part of their healer. So that basically they join a partnership with Christ in their healing process, and they are able to cope with and what they might identify as is completely heal. But then there are others that have triggers along the way. And when they're met with those triggers, they utilize their coping skills, they utilize therapy, they may pray through this moment and say, I am activated. Lord, help me to get through this moment. And so healing has lots of dynamics to it and how we may respond and how it may manifest and change over time.
I think also spiritually, we're all on a journey. And that journey is forever ongoing. I worry about the word complete because if there's complete, then there's no place for growth. right? And even if you don't have a tremendous crisis moment or trauma, you're also still growing into completeness. So I like to de-escalate a little bit the stress of, am I going to be okay or am I finally okay? None of us are okay, but we are blessed. And when we walk with Jesus and we get closer to Jesus, we get closer to our ultimate fullness. And that's the way I like to see it, as a growth and a journey.
Yeah. Being complete in Christ doesn't mean you've reached the limit. It means you're continuing the growth process.
I'm in his presence.
That's right. That's right. Excellent. Let's go to our second question.
Thanks for taking my question. This is kind of like a general question you probably heard before a million times. What suggestions would you have for someone who hasn't fully recovered from the isolation of COVID? And then, it's years later, but while COVID was going on, they was kind of, pushing people away. It's dangerous outside, stuff like that. But again, this is like years later, and you're like, no, birds are flying, people are out, time to socialize a little bit. No, it's still out there, and they're like in their 40s, 50s. They're not really. So are there any general suggestions that maybe I can sit down and talk to that person or whatever?
Yeah, let's start off by saying give yourself grace. This was a global pandemic. Healing takes time. One thing that we utilize in anxiety or even with phobias is called graded exposure. So if the person is having a hard time going to the grocery store, maybe they're gonna go for 15 minutes, get one carton of eggs and then get out of there. And then as they develop new coping skills, maybe they build up to an hour. So rather than expecting people to go right back into their routine, we're gonna set gradual goals and gradual benchmarks coupled with a wellness routine, a mental health wellness routine. As you develop added capacity, you take on added exposure. And a therapist could be tremendous in walking them through that journey.
Yeah, I also think that we talked a lot about the new normal when we were in COVID, and I think what you're talking about a little bit is the new normal. When I think about generational impact, there's going to be people who have got used to getting community through a screen. And there's a lot of safety psychologically, physically that happens there. Empathy, I think, is a great tool. And if they're not ready to go to community, see if community is ready to come to them. Like, be their friend. Can you bring another friend to be their friend? Like, baby steps and empathy.
Excellent. Great. Let's go to our third question.
Thank you. As the parent of adult children, what advice would you give that parent to allow that child to seek mental health if needed, so they feel like it's okay and not feel stigmatized by seeking that help?
Yeah, I think it starts with normalizing mental health in everyday conversations, right? So it may start with modeling. I know I have 2-year-old daughters, and I already say, Mommy's feeling tired today, Mommy's feeling happy today. And so even starting to externalize your own experiences. Externalize, I'm feeling stressed, and so I'm going to use this coping mechanism. That kind of opens the door to destigmatizing what it means. So when you say, so how are you feeling? And you know what? Let's connect you to someone that you can talk to about those feelings. The door is progressively being made open. So making it a normative part of family conversation. The same way you go to see a dentist, the same way you go to see a physician, you go to a chiropractor, this is a place for you as well.
I would ask, are you as the influencer willing to see a therapist? Because one of the first things I do if I'm sitting with someone who I have a suspicion should be seeing someone for some help is I let people know I do, right? And it's one of the things I do from the pulpit. I make it open and known. I have struggles. I'm not afraid to get help for my struggles. And so if I'm a parent trying to influence a young adult, I would be in therapy just so that I can do that better.
Wow.
And noting that if the adult child is not willing to go, there's a way in which you can respond where you can go in and you can talk to a therapist of how can I support my child through this because they're not willing to come in. And so that's often an angle that we use as well, is working with the parent to provide the young person or the adult child with the resources until they're willing to come in.
Wow, and I really appreciate the emphasis you guys are placing on normalizing it. If you got neck pains, you go see a chiropractor. You got dental issues, you go see a dentist. It's just normal to do that. And so mental health also should be part of that as well.
Yes.
Excellent. Excellent. Why don't we go to our fourth question? We got some time for more questions.
Yeah, in Romans 8:28, I believe it is, it says that all things work together for our good. How do you reinforce that to someone who's just has the feeling that a ton of bricks has fallen on them?
I think we don't start with that text. We say, I hear that you said that a ton of bricks have fallen on you. Tell me what that's like for you. I think we have to use discernment and wisdom about when we apply a certain text. And so again, I'm going to come back to Lamentations. This might be that moment, right? So rather than kind of flowing into overly spiritualizing their experience, I think sometimes, being still and know that I am God, being still with that person. And it can be hard because we often want to give solutions so that we can feel better about you feeling better quickly. Because when you're distressed, I'm distressed, right? And so it takes a bit more bandwidth for us to actually be present with someone that's in sorrow and someone that's in suffering. But that's often the time what they need the most is just being present.
Alisha, you took it right out of my mouth, because all things do work together for good for those who love the Lord. However, it may not be that time right now. Like God has an eternity to work it, right? All things are also possible. I'm still not a millionaire. But I have the wealth of the universe at my disposal through Jesus. So yes, don't spiritualize it too much and don't rush it too much.
Right. Wow. Excellent. And that's a really good point, I think, because we do hear these quick answers, quick responses, and it's supposed to take away what we feel, what we're struggling with, right?
You know who had quick... Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, you know who had quick answers? Job's 3 friends.
Great example.
Right.
Just
example.
pull back on those, right?
Yes.
Just let, they spent 7 days sitting around the ashes with him before they uttered a thing. And I often reflect on that and think, man, I wish they would have sat a little longer.
And having humility to say that I don't know the answers. I'm not coming to serve as one that's offering you answers. I'm coming to serve as someone that's here to hear about your sorrow.
Go on the journey.
Be with your pain. I'm going to sit with you, right? Rather than try to command you what could be supportive in this moment. Because that might not be where they're at that moment.
Right. And let me ask you guys this, and that is this. You guys are professionals. You've been a social worker, you were educated, you've been educated. Most of us will never go through counseling courses. What would you say are tools that we can develop in becoming better, maybe mental health counselors or helping people with their mental health struggles?
I think, one of the things that's not done well in our society is just journeying with people, just having a relationship with people, just being the Mary, Lazarus, and Martha to Jesus, like just being with people. If people are hungry for one thing and need one thing to up their mental health or emotional intelligence, it's relationship. We all have that to offer, but we hold that back for some reason.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, and there's so many techniques that can help to bring us into a space of self-regulation that are accessible at any point. Things like humming, things like walking, things like deep breathing, right? Things like stretching. And so if we're able to integrate these things into our everyday life or these principles into our everyday life, then it's a lifestyle. It's not just something that I access when I'm in active crisis mode. It's something that I use to manage my stress. It's something that I use to manage and to find optimal mental health.
Wow. I really believe we've just scratched the surface here. I mean, we could do a whole series on this, write multiple books on this, and it'd still be so much to discuss. I want to thank you guys for being here. It's been tremendous. I really believe this has been a discussion of healing and of itself a healing discussion. And so I want to thank you for just sharing your insights and your experiences with us. If you are struggling with anxiety, with depression, or with any mental health challenge, there is good news for you. You're not alone, whether or not you're a person of faith. Being a person of faith doesn't mean that we won't have challenges to our emotional and mental health, but we have a God who understands what we go through, and He is always there to provide the support we need to make it through each day. A big thank you to all of you again for joining us. We'll see you next week for another episode of Hope at Night.